Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Today, we're going to talk about starting the podcast that builds your exit plan. And I am just going to get ready to share with everyone. So, as you're coming in, just let me know where you are joining from and how you learned about today's class. All right, cool, cool, cool. A lot of people are coming in. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So I was trying to live stream this also over on LinkedIn, but running into a little bit of whatever technical difficulties, but that's part of the program. That's a part of podcasting, right? So come on in while I figure this out, share my slides with you all. I usually don't do that, by the way. So you are in the right place if you are here for the Start the Podcast that builds your exit plan course. Okay. If you're here for the podcast that builds your exit plan live class, I am your presenter today, Nicaila Matthews Okome, and we are about to get started talking about all things podcasting and how to really leverage it as something that you are able to use to launch you into so many different things. So let me know in the chat who's in the building. And then, by the way, afterwards, we will have Q&A. So during that Q&A, you can ask me anything you want to know about podcasting, about my process, how I got started, my recommendations, and all that good stuff. So make sure you stick around for our Q&A. All righty. And let me see who's over here in the chat. Boop, 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 boop. All right. Colette joining from Atlanta. Heard about this after following me from the LinkedIn talk. Yes, y'all, I did a LinkedIn chat. What was that, 2 days ago? All about the side hustle piece, like building an in-demand side hustle. And it all started from my podcast. So come on in. Yay. So glad all of you found me from LinkedIn. That's amazing. That's awesome. I love, love, love LinkedIn and the team over there. They're just so awesome. All righty. So we're going to get started. And let me know too. I'd love to know if you already have a podcast or if you are thinking about it and trying to figure out if you should, start your podcast. So let me know if you have one already and if you're just thinking about it. Okay. And while you do that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Boom, boom, boom. All right, here you go. So give me a 1 in the chat if you can see my slides. It says start the podcast that builds your exit plan. Go ahead and give me a 1. All right, in the chat. Cool beans. All right. We're in business, y'all. So today, like I said, we're talking about starting the podcast that builds your exit plan and frees you from that career that you have outgrown and that you need a break from. Okay. So this class is for you if you feel burned out, uninspired, ready for a change in your career. It's also for you if you want to use your voice and your expertise to open up new opportunities outside of your 9 to 5. And it's for you if you know you're meant for more, but you just aren't really sure how to make it happen. So if you want to build a platform that makes you discoverable to the right people and the right opportunities, podcasting is it. And I'm going to break it down even further than that. So you're in the right place if you are in this career that it pays the bills, but it drains your energy. It drains your soul. All right. It's just not worth it. You want a way to build something of your own that's going to open new doors. Okay. So podcasting is going to be that key. And then you're also in that right place if you are finally ready to make your expertise and your story and your voice work for you instead of staying stuck in that career path that no longer feels aligned. So many of us, our whole life is about telling someone else's brand story, using our voice for someone else's business. And it's time that we take back some of that agency and we use it for ourselves. And that's my whole goal in doing this class, is to make you recognize that you can use your voice and your expertise in a completely different way for yourself. And of course, you're also in the right place if you know you're meant for more, which all of you are, and you want to use podcasting as that bridge from where you are now to the career and life that you actually want. So popping over to the chat, I see currently trying to plan out a podcast. That's what Courtney says. Vanessa's thinking about it. Joyce says, I've joined one of your previous webinars and saw this in your email. I have a podcast called Transplants. Ooh, love it, aiming to make money from it in 2026. Ooh, Joyce, my wheels are already turning. That is such a good concept. And there's so many ways that you can leverage that for monetization. So yes, let's talk some more. So after this class, you will be 100% clear on what it takes to run a podcast that creates the income and the opportunities that you want. So we're talking about podcasts that are money makers. Okay. We're not talking about podcasts that are hobbies anymore. We're talking about business. And so I'm going to get into the 3 steps to turn your podcast into a platform that builds your exit plan this year. By the way, this is the last class of the year that I'm teaching. So I'm really, really serious about you ending off the year with a plan to start 2026 off really strong. Okay. So that's the goal here. All right. So now let's take a step back. So some of you saw me this week on LinkedIn. So, quick intro for those who don't know me. I'm Nicaila. Hi, everyone again. And in 2016, I launched my podcast, a hit podcast called Side Hustle Pro, where I profile Black women entrepreneurs who have scaled from passion project to profitable business. And it's the first and only podcast to do that. And I grew Side Hustle Pro to 10 million plus downloads and multiple 6 figures in sponsorship revenue each year. And while I was doing that, it was my side hustle. I was working full-time at NPR, Legacy Brand National Public Radio, and I was leading their digital marketing for their top podcasts, like How I Built This, Code Switch, Invisibilia, and so many more of your favorites. And then in 2017, after growing out the podcast, growing out my revenue streams, I was able to quit my career at NPR and focus full-time on Side Hustle Pro Media. And I have not looked back. I have been going ever since. So since then, I've taught over 1,000 podcasters to run their own podcast business. And it is my mission to help other podcasters to turn their voice into income. So they can walk away from careers that no longer serve them. And that is the whole premise of today's class. I really realized that not a lot of people truly understand the business side of podcasting, especially as an independent podcaster. So let's get into it, okay? And then Vanessa asked, will a recap be available? Yes, there will be a recap. However, I am also going to be offering you the opportunity to work with me, right? To get coaching for your podcast. And if you would like some of the fast action bonuses that I'm going to offer, make sure that you stick around as long as you can. All right. So speaking of that, quick housekeeping, we'll be here for about 60 minutes. To ask your questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box and try to give me as much context as you can so I can be as thorough and helpful as I can. And yes, there will be a replay, Vanessa, but only for 48 hours, okay? And I'll be sharing details about Podcast Moguls Group Coaching, which is my podcast coaching program, and I'll be sharing that at the end of this class. Now, let's take a step back for a second. Why am I here? Why are you here? Well, about 10 years ago, my journey to this moment started. So back in May 2015, I posted this highlight reel over on Instagram and Facebook, and it was me sitting with my cap and gown in front of the Michigan Ross School of Business. I was graduating with my MBA, Master's of Business Administration, and I look like the pinnacle of success here, right? But what you can't see, that inside, I'm actually freaking out because at this point, I was actually graduating with no job because I was rejected from Google. I put all my eggs in that basket. After I interned there, I just knew I was going to get that full-time offer, but I did not. So I was graduating with no job, no plan, no backup plan. And I was moving back to DC to live with my boyfriend with absolutely no income, very little savings, because, I'd spent it in grad school thinking I'm going to land this 6-figure job and I'll build it back up again. That was not the case. So once I got back to DC, I said, I need to get my life together. This is not what I went to business school for. I got to figure this out. And at that point, I knew I wanted to build my personal brand. Why? Because I wanted a job. I wanted to get hired, and I knew I needed to stand out from other candidates. So I needed to build my personal brand, right? But I wasn't really sure what that all entailed. So I started following online branding coaches. So like many of you, I was looking like, okay, who's in this space? What are they doing? And what can I learn? So I looked at people like Amy Porterfield or Maya Elias here on the right. And they encouraged me to relaunch my blog. And it was very tacky. This is a direct screenshot from KaylaKSpeaks.com, which is still up to show y'all my humble beginnings. And at that point, I had content. Okay. Like I had the first step in the equation, but I had no real purpose. I didn't know what I was doing. But the important thing was that I got started. Because if I didn't put up this tacky blog in 2015, I wouldn't be where I am today, which is being, selected to speak as a premium conversationalist at LinkedIn the other day, being here with you. It all started from this first step. And so that is what I learned in the beginning of the journey. You have to be willing to take the first step. And I'm even going to change that to a first step, right? Because sometimes we're waiting on the perfect first step, but you have to be willing to take a first step. Do it ugly, do it unsure, just take a first step, even when you don't know where it will lead. And because I took that first step and because it's led me where I am, I also learned that there's no aha moment. It's not coming. Okay. The sit around and work and think and write and do all this contemplating and waiting for that big idea to land on you. It's not coming. I'm sorry to break it to you. What happens is the aha moment that you're looking for, it actually comes gradually. It comes when you're in action. You start to see clues. You start to see some clues along the way. And that was my experience. So for me, my action was starting my blog. And I started with the homies. All of these people you see on the header, these are my friends. I reached out to them to interview them because at this point I was pivoting from just talking about any and everything on that blog to really honing in on an interview style blog because I was trying to figure out my life path. I knew that I saw myself doing something entrepreneurial, but I wanted a steady job first. So I wanted to talk to other people who I saw having that same kind of path and passion. And I reached out to friends who were doing that. So that was the beginning of my blog. And then because I took a first step, after several months of blogging, I started to see a common thread, which was I loved sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. And that's when the idea for my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, was born. Okay. So a year before launching Side Hustle Pro, I actually didn't listen to podcasts. I didn't know what it was. And I just happened to learn about it very randomly one day. And then there I was a year later. And in the first 7 days after launching Side Hustle Pro podcast, I landed in the top charts. This is Side Hustle Pro on the left in the top marketing charts. And then on the right, number 37 in business. And if you have a keen eye, I'm actually above my virtual mentor, Amy Porterfield, right? So the student was surpassing the teacher in this moment. And that's exactly what I want for you and all my podcast Moguls coaching students too. Like, go forth and flourish. And then from there, and by the way, this is still my side hustle, right? So Side Hustle Pro was even featured on Apple. It was featured above new and noteworthy. It was featured in the bold woman category that they had. And so what do you do when something starts picking up steam? You go hard. I went hard on promotion that summer. As you can see, I got t-shirts printed up. I launched a Side Hustle Pro shop. I was just on a roll because I realized that I was onto something. Now, if I took this seriously, I could quit my job. That was my personal goal. It's kind of like I saw the possibility. And because I took that first step, the possibility, all the different potential lanes started revealing themselves to me. But I knew what I learned and what you see in that quote that I'm pointing to. I knew that knowing what you already know will keep you where you already are. That's what that quote says that I'm pointing to. And this is in 2016. This is me at a conference with my Side Hustle Pro t-shirt. And by the way, at those conferences, I would go up to people. I would tell them about my show. I would go up to people I wanted to interview and introduce myself and ask if I could email them, to pitch them to be on the show. So that was just such a turning point moment for me because I realized, okay, I went to school for communications. Then I went to get my MBA, but I didn't know anything about how to make money podcasting. So knowing what I already knew was going to keep me where I already was. So I knew I wanted to do this. So I started studying podcast monetization. How do I make money? I needed to make a plan and work that plan. So I started going to conferences and I started investing in courses to learn how to pitch sponsors, because that was one of the main monetization channels that I kept seeing everyone talk about, both at work and outside of work. And I was like, all right, how can I, as an independent podcaster, pitch someone and have them sponsor my show? So I couldn't find anyone who was teaching podcasting or teaching podcast monetization. So I ended up investing $1,197 in a 2-day event sponsorship intensive. That means it was about events. It was about hosting conferences. I didn't want to host a conference, but I knew that even though it wasn't podcast specific, I was just eager to learn anything at all about sponsorship. And I didn't take this investment lightly because my podcast wasn't making money, right? So I was investing my regular work paycheck into this, and it was a big decision. And I remember asking myself the would it be worth it if question. That is always my equation that I use to today, right today still. Like, is this a good investment? I asked myself, would it be worth it if? And so I said, would it be worth it if I invest this money and then I learn the skill of pitching sponsors, which is going to pay for itself over and over again with future podcast sponsorship contracts? Would it be worth it? Yes, that's what I told myself. So I took this sponsorship intensive. And then 6 months after launching Side Hustle Pro podcast, I pitched my very first sponsor cold. Didn't know anyone at the company, saw an email on their website, pitched that email with it, sent them a note about my show. And then I ended up earning my first $4,000 podcast sponsorship contract from that email. Which, by the way, I'm going to give you that email if you join the program today. It's a fast action bonus. You'll see, chef's kiss, why that got me a $4,000 contract. And $4,000 is nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a whole salary. That's a whole month of income, right? And I said, okay, if I could do this once, I could do it again. Like, if I double the amount of effort that I put in for this one contract, imagine if I, get more. So that's what I started to do. I started to go hard on that revenue stream. I also explored other revenue streams. And then a year and a half after launching Side Hustle Pro, I launched in June 2016. By December 2017, I was able to quit my job to podcast full time. And this is the update I posted at the time. This is back in December 2017. You can go back still and listen to this episode just to share with you, like, this was my mindset. These were the things I was considering at the time. And this is how I knew I was ready to make that leap. And then after that, Side Hustle Pro took off. This is me featured on the Today Show as a side hustle expert. This is me featured in Oprah Magazine and in Forbes. And then in 2022, I was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And this was such a surreal moment. I mean, I was just the class of people that I was in who had been podcasting for years, some decades. And I was inducted into this Podcast Hall of Fame. Like, what an honor. And also, what a surreal moment. I went from graduating with no job and no money, no plan either, to the Podcast Hall of Fame. And it all came because I started building my exit plan like you're doing today by coming to this class. It all came because I started building my exit plan with a podcast. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Because the truth is that if you are here today, I know that you don't just want to build an exit plan. You don't just want to make money and, get paid to podcast. Like, that is at the fundamental core of who you are. That's not truly what you're here for. You want freedom. And when I say that, like, I'm not saying everyone needs to up and quit their jobs, okay? Freedom looks different for everybody. It truly does. And not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur either. But you need to have options. And when you have options, you have freedom from that corporate hamster wheel holding you, in that anxious state all the time. Freedom from the fear of layoffs. Even when you have a good job, you have to be afraid of, oh my God, what happens if I get laid off? No backup plan, right? And it's freedom from financial uncertainty, freedom from feeling like, if this happens, I can't do this. Being able to have other options of how you get income and how you provide for yourself and your family is golden. So it's also freedom to work and live on your own terms. Now, this week, my kids are homesick, and that happens all the time when you have kids. Like, you just never know when you'll just need to rearrange your schedule. And because of the lifestyle that I've been able to curate because I have my own business, because I have my own podcast and media platform. I am able to adjust and work around these, disruptions in schedules, beautiful disruptions, but still disruptions. So it's freedom in your schedule, and it's freedom to just think differently. So I know that you've been trying to figure this out because I saw you over on the Build Your In-Demand Side Hustle class, right? And now you're here today. I know you've been trying to figure this out, and you've probably thought, should I take podcasting more seriously? Should I consider podcasting at all? How do I grow a podcast? How do I actually make money from it? Is it worth all the effort? Yes. Yes, it's worth the effort. And how do I use this to shift my life path, right? So you've probably even tried starting your podcast before, or posting on Instagram, or posting on LinkedIn, dancing on TikTok even. You've tried it all, and the results have not been great. And the results are forcing you to think, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to stick to what I already know and do. And let me tell you, the results haven't been great because your mind is all over the place. That's the only reason. It's not you. It's not some deficit that you have. It's just, it's noisy out here. There's so many people telling you different things. Do this, do that, earn money this way. And it is overwhelming. So it's time to focus in on an expert that you trust, a path that you want to reverse engineer and replicate, and then get laser focused on following that path. So here's the real reason too, while you haven't figured it out yet. You don't know the real power of podcasting. If you are on the fence right now about podcasting, let me put you on game real quick. Let me tell you what podcasting really does for me. Okay. The real power of podcasting is, number one, it is the most powerful networking tool you didn't know you had. Nowadays people, they're trying to send messages on LinkedIn. They're trying to go to networking events still like it's, 2003. And I'm here to tell you, like, they're not enough messages in the world that you can send. There are not enough lunches, coffee chats that you can do, events you can attend to make you have the kind of network that you will have when you have a podcast, when you are in conversation with people. It is incredible. Even the event, the wonderful premium conversation I was blessed to do with LinkedIn, right? That came from a podcast relationship. That came from someone, them interviewing me on their podcast and just having such a rich experience that they thought of me when it was time to do another opportunity. And I feel confident reaching out to anyone now because I have an excuse to talk to them. Like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Of course, that's not how I approach them, right? I actually show you the emails that I send people that have landed all my guests. So you know how to approach people, but I feel confident approaching anybody because of this platform that I now have. So if you need to network, whether it's for your next role or for your business, just to figure out your life, podcasting is it. And then speaking of that, it is your bridge. It is your bridge from where you are to the career and the business you want, one conversation at a time. It's such a relief. If you're trying to figure out, that next step, I want to give you a moment to just breathe. Just breathe with me, because if you're looking for it and you're worried about figuring it out, I'm here to tell you that if you would just have some more conversations, if you would allow yourself to use the energy that you have used for worrying to start your podcast and have conversations on your podcast, that bridge, one step at a time, is starting to form. You're starting to build that bridge because now people have you in mind. Now people reach out to you because they know what you talked about, and they'll say, hey, someone just shared this with me. You see how that works? It is amazing when you're in motion, what comes to you. And I know those of you with a science background understand the physics of that too. And then finally, it is a launch pad. It's absolutely a launch pad to sponsorship, clients, speaking gigs, and partnerships that fit your next chapter. And a lot of these opportunities, because you've launched yourself and you've shown what you can do, a lot of these opportunities start coming to you. If you look over on my Instagram, I recently had a partnership with Cash App, right? And like, these are opportunities that come to me. Like, I didn't pitch them because of the platform I've built and the community they know that we're building over here at Side Hustle Pro. So all of that is available to you with a podcast. So if you knew the real power of podcasting, you would stop playing and really prioritize your podcast once and for all for 2026. Drop a podcast in the chat if you are going to start playing and start this podcast. Ooh, see some familiar faces. Hi, Charlene. Skiwi. Abel says, I'm struggling to rebuild my career abroad. And watching you on LinkedIn this week is an aha moment. Yes, Brian Johnson podcast. Whoop, whoop. Crystal, Ashanta. Okay. So yes, now we're going to really prioritize this, right? Because we see the power of it. Okay. So now let me just remind you that you already have what it takes. I know you're in this class to learn, what do I do? But let me just reinforce that you have what it takes too. Your skills, your story, your voice, they are enough to start. You don't need a huge audience, contrary to popular belief. You don't need a fancy studio. You don't need a journalism degree. You just need the right steps to position your podcast now as this bridge to your next chapter. Let's talk about these next steps, okay? These are the 3 steps to turn your podcast into a true exit plan. Now, step number 1, let's jump right in. Step number 1 is to build a podcast that gets found by the right people. That's half of the work. If your podcast is getting found, even more than half, that's 80% of the work. If your podcast gets found, that is 80% of the work. You need to be discoverable, right? But what holds most people back from this, what seems like so simple, so like duh of a thing, is that a lot of people are starting these casual, just chatting podcasts with friends, with the homies, with the girls, right? And giving it these vague titles, these like trendy titles, which, by the way, will go out of trend at some point. And they're giving it these vague titles or clever inside jokes. And guess what? No one's searching for those topics, and they're not searching for it for the reasons you think a lot of times. So you have to steer away from doing that. And then what also holds most people back is staying broad so you don't box yourself in. But what you're actually doing is boxing out your audience instead, because they don't know what your show's about. They don't know what you're talking about over there. And you want to avoid that. Again, you want to be discovered, and they want people to understand immediately so they can make an action fast, which is to listen or watch your show. What also holds most people back, especially now, oh my God, is jumping into the video and the in-person studio stuff and pouring all this cash into gear and setups. And I don't care what you see. I don't care what you see on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere. You do not need to do all that, especially when your show isn't making money yet. What I teach you in Podcast Moguls is about profitability, okay? You know about my business background, okay? We are going to look at cost of goods, all right? We're going to look at the income, the revenue, and we're going to keep you profitable. So you need a clear plan to grow and monetize before you start doing all that. I'm not against all that, but you see me, I'm still here in my home, right? Why? Because that keeps my margins where I like them. So that is, though, the number one mistake that most podcasters make, which is what keeps you stuck at this just content phase instead of building out an exit plan. You get hyper focused on those things that don't matter and you get stuck. And this is why it holds you back. People who need your show, they can't even find you. And if they do happen to come across your show, it's unclear what your show is really about. And then you end up spending a lot of money on the wrong things instead of making it clear what your show is about so that they will go ahead and click, play. So here's how to build a podcast that opens doors and gets you found. Your podcast can help the right people discover you, your story, and your expertise as long as you are findable. Now, to demonstrate this, I want to share a little case study with you. This is one of my Podcast Moguls students. Her name is Erica M. McAfee. She joined Podcast Moguls with her show, and it was called the Erica M. McAfee Podcast. Go ahead and put in the chat if you can figure out why, give me one reason why you think that this was probably not the best name for a podcast. And while you do that, I'll give you one hint. You can save a lot of real estate on your podcast logos by taking out the podcast, the word podcast, taking out the URLs that people can't click on, right? Like save that visual space and people know it's a podcast, so you don't have to put that on your logo. All right, let me see what you put. Zakira says, because I don't know who she is. Dun dun dun. Yes, Zakira. Vanessa, don't know what the podcast is about. Exactly, not knowing who she is. Right. The only people who are searching your name are people like me who are nosy, right? Or stalkers, your old classmates who want to be in your business. No one else is searching for you, okay? Or employers who want to stalk you too. So Erica has an amazing platform and show that she started, which is about grief and infant and pregnancy loss. So it is such an important show. And the women who need her the most were not searching for her name. So once she joined the program, that shifted, because this title lacked clarity on audience and mission. It was harder for the right listeners to find her. And because she was so focused on creating episodes, she wasn't truly building out the platform that she could. Now, once she joined Podcast Moguls and went through the programs, came to my coaching calls, she rebranded to the Sisters in Loss podcast. And what the title does is it is the first signal of what the show is about. Now, all titles don't need to be verbatim, but it is the first thing that people come in contact with that piques their interest. And then they go look at the description and the episode titles, and they see the full picture. So sisters in loss, people who are searching for loss, people who are searching for stories of, other women, Black women, sisters, and you see the African print that she's wearing, you see her beautiful face, and you're like, if you're searching for this, that's going to give you pause. So this was clear, mission-driven positioning. It instantly speaks to the audience she wants to reach. She became discoverable, leading to more downloads, more opportunities, and more partnerships. So when your audience knows exactly who you serve and why, your podcast stops being just content and it starts becoming this platform for growth and for income. We're not just building platforms, we're not just building podcasts inside of Podcast Moguls, we are building platforms. Now, one more case study for y'all, because my students are just amazing. This is a podcast from Lori Tharps. She's a Podcast Moguls OG, and she came in with a show called My American Melting Pot. And as you can see, the artwork, even though it's gorgeous artwork, it does not tell you what this show is about. It could be about anything, right? Political discourse, food. It could be about anything, right? And again, that you see so many different kinds of people. It's also like, oh, she's talking to so many different types of people. Is this for me? So again, lacked a clear focus and audience alignment. The episodes covered many, many topics, making it really hard for the right listeners to connect. And then again, she was so focused on producing content instead of building out her growth strategy. So she ran into a wall. So here's what we did. After being in the program, Lori really took a hard look at what her passion is, what she wants to talk about. And she was burnt out actually about talking about race, which is what she was talking about with her My American Melting Pot brand. She was burnt out of the racism discourse. And what she really wanted to do was give voice to other authors and writers of color to help them understand how to put their voices into the world and make an impact that way. So she relaunched an entirely new podcast called Read, Write, and Create. And I just love this name. She's since rebranded to Your BIPOC Writing Coach, which is also awesome. But this was the first iteration of her rebrand, right? It's clear niche positioning that speaks directly to her target audience. She streamlined the branding. You see the typewriter. If you're searching for write, create, you're going to see her. You have her smiling face, the beautiful dynamic colors. So streamlined branding and messaging that made the show instantly more discoverable and instantly more readily available to stop people in their tracks and make them look at the description and episode titles, which is what you want them to do. And so that led to stronger audience engagement, and it opened the door for so many growth opportunities. We're going to talk a little bit more about Lori in a second, but when your podcast speaks directly to the people you want to reach, it stops them in their tracks, y'all. And then it creates a platform that attracts opportunities and drives impact. So a lot of people will tell me that their podcasts don't make money, or that, if you have an indie podcast, or even what some people call a small podcast, that you can't make money. And what I tell them is that podcasts that don't make money, they aren't discoverable. That's the first mistake. And the people who need your message the most, they cannot find you. Okay. So you got to make it easy for people to find you. If people can't find your podcast, they can't listen, they can't watch. And so they definitely can't buy anything from you. So that's the first step, is getting found. So it starts with that trifecta. Your podcast name needs to be strategic. Your podcast description needs to hammer home what you're talking about. And then your episode titles are your discoverability power tools. And by the way, now with AI and ChatGPT, you don't have to do this work alone. I show you inside of Podcast Moguls how I use ChatGPT to strategize, to come up with even more strategic and impactful titles that are going to get that SEO traffic to me. Like, I show you how to do that. So you have a partner in all of this. You don't have to do this alone. In 2016, there was no ChatGPT. So I was out here figuring this out on my own. And by the way, discovery is what drives your downloads, and downloads is what drives income. Because if you think about it, downloads is visibility. That means the more people who are coming across, the more people that you may convert into buying a product or a service or a course or something that you are selling. So that's the step number one. Now, let's get into step two. Let me know step two in the chat if you're with me and if you're ready to talk a little bit more. All right. Ariane says, I'm in my 8th season. My podcast definitely started as a hobby. Okay. And Crystal says she put everything on the image. Y'all are so funny. All right. I got a thumbs up. Thank you, Charlene. Ready for step two. Let's get into it. All right. So step one was getting found. And step two is the growth factor. Okay. Step two is now you need to grow your audience. And you do that by deeply understanding who they are and what they need. Now, what holds a lot of people back here is pouring all of their energy into launching their podcast. Like, so many people put so much energy into the colors, a launch party, like all sorts of ridiculousness. And then it launches and you barely promote it each week because life gets busy and you're just skating by to get the episodes up, right? So that's number one. And then what also holds most people back is skipping that work of truly getting to know their audience, which means what they care about, who they are, where they spend their time, what they're searching for. And that is the most important thing, because you're not making a show for you. It starts off with ideas and things that you want to talk about, but ultimately you want someone else to listen to this. So you have to figure out who that someone is, right? So the other thing that holds you back is treating your audience like this faceless group instead of like a real person with specific goals, challenges, and interests. What I mean by that is it would be easy for me because, I have a show about Black women side hustlers to just say, I want to talk to Black women, right? But no, I actually have a person in mind. So my perfect listener, like I teach everyone how to do in Podcast Moguls, is to find this perfect listener. And mine is named Janelle. And she lives in New York City. She works for American Express. She went to NYU, got her MBA, and she loves the finer things in life, traveling with her girls and all that good stuff. So she's keeping her good job. But on the side, she's dabbling in creating her own body care products with shea butter. And so she is soaking up all this information from the show to figure out, how do I launch a business? How do I scale it? And all these other things before making that leap. So with Janelle in mind, me knowing her age, where she lives, I could get as granular as the block if I wanted to, because I'm from New York. But that's how much I know my girl. And that's how much you need to know your person, because then you create it's almost like you're having a conversation with them. And that is what makes the show take off, because then Janelle is sharing it with her girls and they're sharing it with their cousins. And it becomes so shareable because people know exactly who it's for and who needs it in their life. Now, here's a smarter approach to doing all of this. If you want to grow your own show or start your own show on the right foot, understand your audience to grow your audience. So that is exactly what Shanitria of the Blunt Blowing Mama podcast has done. This is one of my top 10 favorite podcast names of all time. She is an OG Podcast Moguls alum. She is so dope. And she started this podcast, obviously, to talk about moms who use cannabis and don't think it's a bad thing. So she came into the program with a smaller social and podcast footprint, and she really wanted to know how to grow her brand. So she grew her audience using the Side Hustle Pro OMG formula that I teach inside of Podcast Moguls, which helped her to clarify her message, clarify who she was talking to, and then build content that resonated deeply with that person. And then that positioned her podcast for explosive growth. So here's what happened after she joined the program. She said it herself. This is actually a screenshot that she shared unsolicited. I was promoting this class one day, and she just put this in her IG story. She said, Side Hustle Pro is an amazing podcast coach. As someone who is one of her podcast mogul students, I can truly say she helped me get Blunt Blowing Mama podcast off the ground, grow BBM's IG page. I only had 3,000 followers when I started her program, and through her techniques, I've grown organically to over 21,000 engaged followers. She really knows her stuff. And if you want to really build a successful podcast, then her Podcast Moguls program is worth the investment. So shout out to Shanitria. I was literally just DMing her this morning. Now, Shanitria grew from 3,000 to 21,000 Instagram followers by applying the strategies learned inside of Podcast Moguls. And she didn't stop there. Her audience kept growing as she stayed consistent. She has now surpassed the teacher. I don't have 120,000 followers. She does, because she put those principles into play and she really understands her audience. She knows exactly who she's talking to and what they need, the different emotions they go through, right? The shame, the fear, the worry, but also knows that their mental health is in jeopardy if they can't figure this out. So she has grown an engaged community of 121,000 plus who not only discover her podcast, but also listen, share, and invest in her workshops and membership community anytime she has it, right? So these platforms that you are building, it's almost like you have now set yourself up with a community that you can activate anytime that you need it. You don't have to feel pressure to do something every single day. But when you are passionate about launching something, you now have a community to launch to. So podcasts that struggle to make money often have another thing in common. They don't truly know their audience. They have just been pushing out content, just shouting into the void, and they haven't really honed in on who that person is. And if you don't know who you're talking to and what they need, it's nearly impossible to sell products, secure sponsors, or grow your business. It's kind of like you're in Times Square just shouting on a megaphone, and there's so many people, right? The opportunity is rich, but nobody knows you're talking to them. You're just white noise. So you want to avoid that by truly honing in on somebody. Let me know, what can we say this time? Let's say step two, if you're following along and you got it. Let me know if you know who your perfect listener is. If you've launched your show or you're thinking about your show, do you have a person in mind? I'm curious, because I know I really needed to do some digging to get my person. I really need to have some conversation. So that's why I love walking people through this process, because it is so eye-opening. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my God, thank you for making me do this exercise. So yes, step 2 was all about understanding this person. Now let's get to making the money, right? So step 3 is when we actually start to test our audience, test our money making streams, right? So what we're going to do, let me go back one. What we're going to do is start small, test different income sources, and track what resonates most with your audience. This kind of takes the pressure off too. So Charlene, I saw that you said like you don't know who you're talking to, and all of this is figure outable, because yeah, a lot of people come in and they don't know who they're talking to, and then also they're not sure how they want to monetize. Well, what I like to do is take the pressure off and remind you that you have time to figure this out, but you need to start testing these different income streams. But what holds most people back from even monetizing is this fear of being seen trying and failing. I know all of you are here because you are accomplished. You have esteemed careers. Some of you have been in your field for years and decades, and you can't be out here looking like you're floundering. I know, I get it. But I'm here to tell you that number one, people are not watching you as much as you think. And a lot of times you are secretly inspiring more people than anyone who might be hating on you. You are secretly have people thinking like, oh my gosh, she's so brave. I see her testing something in public. She is so brave. And they're going to hit you up in the DMs, because that's what happens. People, they're too afraid to even leave a public comment sometimes to say, oh my God, I want to do that too. They're going to hit you up in the DMs and give you support. So get over that fear. And then I know some of you have a fear that, okay, no one's going to buy this. And because of that fear, that leads you to try to perfect it in the lab. Like, oh, if I just workshop this so that it is just beautiful, it's professionally designed and all of this, then people will buy. And again, that's how we waste money, because you need to test and really validate that this is wanted and people will buy this. Because people will lie to you. They will, you say, I'm going to launch a side hustle journal. Would y'all buy it? They're going to be like, first, I'm going to put out a digital or low cost option and see what the demand is like before I invest anything into no premium gold foil design, hard leather bound journals. Y'all not gonna play me. Okay. So yes, you will launch some things and no one will buy and you will live. You is part of the process. All right. So speaking of that, there's also this fear of wasting money, because at this stage, we're investing money either from savings or from our 9 to 5 into our side hustle and our podcast. So you can't afford to waste a dollar. And that's why you get the guidance of a coach, someone who can tell you, all right, this is worth focusing on right now. This you can save for later. And, I went the last, I would say, 8 or so years without a coach. And this was the year I finally reinvested in myself, because I realized like I just kept hitting a wall. I could not see my blind spots. And within only like a week or so of working with my coach, she identified all these blind spots that I was missing out on, things that forced me to lose confidence in myself. And, within that week, like I started picking back up both mojo wise and business revenue wise. So I will never again go without a coach. And I recommend that for you as well. If you are afraid of wasting money or making the wrong step, get a coach, get some guidance, strategic guidance. So here's your next move. Launch one offer, start testing, and let your audience show you what sells. This is how the process works. So here are some example money makers. If you want to launch something like your very first tester, I highly recommend starting with some kind of ebook or guide. You can either have it paid or free, like free just to get you into the rhythm of, okay, here's how I create it. Here's how I make a PDF. Here's how I put it online. And here's how I fulfill it. When you give me your email, here's how I make sure you get it in your email. So that also takes the pressure off. If you just want to do a round where you just learn the whole systems, the back end, because that, tech overwhelm can stop you in your tracks too. So that's one I like. This is one I tested out. These were all tests. This didn't end up being a moneymaker, right? This didn't end up being a win, but I tested it. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Podcast Advertising. And I drafted this up in Canva, used ChatGPT to help me like finesse and flesh it out into a couple of pages, and then put that up and tested with my audience and saw what the interest was. Another thing that you can do is offer one-on-one coaching in an area of expertise. So this is something that all of you can do. Everybody in here, you already have what it takes. Like, I'm not telling you to come out here and try to be an executive coach, but I am telling you that if there's something that people always ask you about, whether it is the operations behind small businesses, because you do that for a company, or whether it's, finances and how to project income for your business, because that's something you do for someone else, anything you've done in your career, you can set aside some time on your calendar and let people know. Put a post on LinkedIn and say, so many people have asked me over the years. I'm finally getting around to it. I'm now offering, and you let them know what you're offering, and use a tool like Calendly. This is what I use. So this is a mock-up of one of my podcast VIP session offerings. So people would go to your calendar, you block off, you only give them limited days, right? You can say Tuesdays from 12 to 5, and then they can select time slots, and you can say only 2 per day or only 3 per day. So if you're worried about overwhelming your calendar, there are parameters in place. But this is a great one, because you know what you can do with this? You information gather. If you don't know what to do next, information gather. Learn what people would want from you. Learn what they would hire you from through these conversations, and use that to eventually inform what your ultimate course or product is going to be. Speaking of that, so once you've done some of these preliminary like moneymaker test, then you might want to consider creating your own course. So I have a podcasting course because my audience and people, fellow podcasters, kept asking me questions. And I said, all right, I can't talk to everybody every single day. So let me distill this information in a way where you can learn, you can go to it on demand, and you can come every month and we talk live and I coach you through your challenges. Plus, we have a private community too, so you can pop in with those questions. So that came directly from demand from other people who saw my expertise, saw how I was moving in this space, and said, can you create a course? And you can do the same thing. And what I love about courses is, look, all of us, we may have had experience in a bunch of areas, but the world keeps changing. Like I said, when I started podcasting, there was no AI, there was no chat GPT. So I now have to learn a new thing yet again. And I want to learn it because I want to optimize my time. So don't be ashamed of courses. Sometimes people, I feel like they try to talk down on courses, but we need courses. We need to keep learning and keep our skills fresh. And then you can also launch products. So that's what Shanitria did. I've done products at some points. Like, these are shirts that people kept seeing her in. She designed it for herself, and they kept asking her, oh, one of those. One of those. So again, another thing where your audience tells you what they want and you go ahead and you fulfill those needs, right? You set up a quick shop and you just, use that as a revenue stream. And not everything has to be like the end all be all. You can have multiple revenue streams. And then, of course, there's sponsorships. Everybody always wants to know about sponsorships, brands. Well, let me tell you something. If you do those foundational steps that I just taught you, brands will start coming to you. Because that's what happened to Tolu. This is Tolu Garcia. She is another Podcast Moguls OG. And she posted this on her IG. I screenshotted it. She said how it started, how it's going. So basically, she came into Podcast Moguls with just ideas, not even one idea. She was still workshopping a few. And she ultimately realized she wanted to talk about user interface design and the narratives and people of color who work in user interface, because it's a tech role and, there are fewer people in color in tech. So she launched this podcast and Google came calling to sponsor it. She was only a few months into the show, but because they were searching for exactly what she was talking about, they found her and they emailed her asking to sponsor her show, her small independent podcast. And so that is what's possible. Not only can you pitch brands, but brands will find you when you do the work. When you do the work that I coach you through, brands will find you. All right. And then speaking of brands finding you, clients will also find you. Your podcast can be a magnet for clients. Let me know if any of you have client-based ideas for your side hustle. Put client in the chat, because the podcast is a bridge to those clients. It's what I like to remind people is that there are not a lot of people who will randomly land on your website. Like, let's say you set up a website for your business, right? Okay, I see Zakira, Crystal have client-based businesses. So there are not a lot of people who are just going to land on your website. But you know how they'll land on your website? If they discover you on a podcast app, listen to your show, and realize, I want to work with her. That is how it goes. And so that's what happened for Lori. She relaunched this whole show and she said herself, I launched a podcast using my Moguls training that is pretty much a sales funnel to attract creative writing students and coaching clients. I am seriously following the Nicaila Matthews Okome methodology, and I'm continuing to see results and growth in my business. Later this year, I'll be hosting my first writing retreat in the south of Spain. How amazing is that? So the podcast does half the work for her. People who are searching up and trying to soak up information about writing their first book, understanding the book industry and landscape, they tune into her show and then they reach out to her to be a writing client, either through her group coaching or to her retreats. And that is what it can do for you as well. So this is the sanctuary that she has. Shout out to Lori. I highly recommend Lori if you want to write a book. And even just the name, like, how amazing is it? You can tell she's a wordsmith, because a sanctuary, I want to join a sanctuary. Of course, I want to join a sanctuary. So like, once people land on your website, finally, because they heard your podcast, the website itself is just like they're shooing because they love what you have to say, and now they landed on your page. Same thing with, so Shanichia created a paid subscription. And what's great about paid subscriptions, that's the final moneymaker I'll talk about today. So the paid subscription thing, private communities are big right now. That's how you'll see a lot of news recently about Joe Budden and his Patreon play and how that's really what's made him a millionaire. Now, private communities work really well when, again, you know your audience and you are offering something that they cannot get just listening to your show for free or just watching it for free. So with Shanichia, what really works there is that a lot of people want to talk about her subject matter, but in private. They want to feel protected. So having a safe space is huge there. So if you recognize that for your content and your lane, then definitely consider having that private community, okay? So those were some options. Now, there's so many ways you can make money podcasting. Those are just some of the high level ones, some of the most popular ones. The key thing is, though, that your first moneymaker, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all buttoned up. It just needs to offer value, offer education, be created with integrity. We're about integrity over here, and then be created with the audience's best interests in mind. So again, you got to create for that person in order for them to buy. They're not just buying because they love you and, you know, they like that you launch something. You have to be solving some kind of pain point, speaking to a pain point that they are going through. Now, the reason why you want to launch is you need to get feedback early and often. The sooner you can get feedback, the sooner you can fine tune your product or service to be something they actually want. So if you, again, wait in the lab trying to perfect it, and then you launch and you realize, oh my God, nobody wants this, or this is not actually the need that I thought it was, then you got to start all over. If you took 6 months, you got to start all over, but start off in January. Next year can be so powerful if you start off in January. Like, start now, get all this information and kick it off in January so that your whole year can be just one where you're thriving. Okay. So you're going to evaluate and grow. You're going to get feedback early and often. You're going to improve your offers with that feedback. And just keep in mind that podcasts that don't make money, they don't test enough. They give up after the first few streams don't work. If I gave up after my t-shirt business didn't take off, I would still be at NPR, right? If I gave up after I, felt like my first course took so long to create and it was so intimidating to sell it. If I gave up then, I wouldn't be where I am today, able to, next year we'll make 10 years into the podcast and 9 years as a full-time entrepreneur. And so I wouldn't be here if I gave up when they don't work. If you got to know, that's actually a good thing. That means you can figure out why you got to know. So you can't make money if you're not putting in that effort and evaluating and growing, though. That is how you make money, okay? And this is exactly why I created Podcast Moguls Group Coaching, because I spoke to so many podcasters who were hobby podcasting, who enjoyed it, who loved it, but just were not reaping any financial benefits. And they were asking me, how are you doing this? What am I doing wrong? And again, I wanted to put all that information in a place where we could have a community and continually talk about this, because I want to help you build a podcast that becomes your exit plan so you can create the freedom, the income, and the impact that you have been dreaming about. So if you are interested in that, I want to share a little bit more about my Podcast Moguls Group Coaching. Inside of my Podcast Moguls Group Coaching, that is where I teach my strategies to podcasters who want to turn their voice into their next chapter and their next income stream using a podcast. So you do have options. You can keep trying to DIY your podcast with tips gathered all over social media and all over YouTube. Like, you can do that if you want. The only problem with that is that you don't see everyone's receipts. Like, you see my receipts, like Podcast Hall of Fame, over 10 million downloads, multiple 6 figures in annual revenue. You see my receipts, okay? And I'm a humble bragger, okay? I could brag some more. So you could do the DIY route, or option 2 would be to decide to make podcasting a priority and get my coaching to know exactly which steps to take. So that's what I hope you do, because you are invited to join Podcast Moguls. And I'll drop the link in a second. But first, I want to break down what exactly it is, because I can't understate or overstate, whichever one it is, how valuable this program is. So, first of all, if you want to turn your podcast or your podcast idea into the foundation of your exit plan, then Podcast Moguls is for you. All right. You are going to learn my proven business strategies to grow, monetize, and leverage your show into real opportunities. That means you get direct access to my business mind and my podcast frameworks that are working right now through monthly live coaching and our private community. And something else I want to add is that as someone who has been in podcasting for a decade now, and has seen the ups and downs, the dips and the peaks and all of that, I can absolutely advise you on all kinds of seasons and all kinds of strategies because I have seen a lot, right? So you are going to be surrounded by others too. You're going to be surrounded by a network of ambitious podcasters who are growing, monetizing, and building freedom together. And in 2026, I have some things planned up my sleeve for some in person as well. So stay tuned for that. But ultimately, if you want to stop guessing what works and start executing a clear, tested roadmap, then Podcast Moguls is for you. It's for you if you want someone like myself to push you into action, okay, and be your strategic advisor every step of the way. I I took a screenshot of this quote the other day, and I just love it so much. It says, "You don't learn to swim by reading about water." And that is the journey in Podcast Moguls in a nutshell. I will not allow you to just keep reading about podcasting. It is time for you to jump in that water and start swimming and have me as your coach. That is the process you get to go through. So the program itself has 3 parts. Part one is a 9 module podcast transformation course, which includes video lessons, my tutorials on how I do everything from record to create social media clips. And it has my swipe files and guides and templates, which means everything I've sent from emails to pitch people to be on the show, from emails to pitch brands to sponsor the show, to how I've grown my email list to, almost over 30,000 people, like all of that is inside of the program. And then part two is the community. It's our private community where you can ask questions and get answers outside of our group coaching calls. So you can post your wins, you can post your challenges, and you get my feedback. So that one-on-one coaching, do not take that for granted. You have that time with me every single month and also in our private community. So part three are those live coaching calls. We meet monthly for video group coaching calls with me. You receive personal guidance from me during these calls. I answer every questions. I stay for every question. You get thorough feedback. So again, you can think of it like one-on-one personal coaching from me because that's how thorough I address every question. And this is what Shirley McAlpine had to say about this experience. By the way, fun fact about Shirley, we met because of her joining the program. And at the time when I was in DC, she reached out to me when she was on a business trip and we met up for drinks and cocktails. And that's the beauty of the kind of coach I am. If I'm in your city or you're in my city, like we are going to link up. Okay. This is not some like virtual, hands off kind of thing. You're getting coached by me and we are forming a relationship. So Shirley said, when she joined, I had at that point 25,000 downloads. And in the last 3 months, I'm now at 46,000 downloads. Her strategy absolutely works. So essentially, Shirley had a podcast when she joined. She was doing pretty good for herself, 25,000. But then in 3 months of having my coaching, being in the program, she was able to almost double that amount of downloads. So that is the power of Podcast Moguls. And then this is Fritz. He is the host of the Coin Gamma podcast. And fun fact about Fritz is that he is not someone who's trying to be an influencer or a content creator, anything like that. He just genuinely loves talking about cryptocurrency and coins. And so he started a podcast. And because he went through Podcast Moguls and got my coaching, guess what? You can't help but get found when you apply these steps. So he says, I was able to speak at over 5 conferences last year, even being flown in internationally to speak at these conferences. And it all came because of the podcast. Okay, like, wow, this is what's possible. So you know what I'm going to do? because I realized that we are at 1 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to join just in case you guys have to hop off. So let me go ahead and do that. So as I'm talking about the program, you can go ahead because there are some fast action bonuses that I want to make sure you have. Okay, because I have one of them, which includes a link to register for a one-on-one call with me, the first 5 people. So if you're interested in Podcast Moguls, go ahead and make sure you register, okay, before the end of class, because I want to make sure that you get the opportunity for that one-on-one call. So Fritz says, I was able to speak at over 5 conferences last year. All right. So this is someone who is doing it for the love of it, thought he was going to do it for hobby, and then ends up being flown out internationally. So again, that's what I'm talking about with that networking, building that bridge, the launch pad to opportunities. That's the real power of podcasting. And it also led him to his next job roles. So what you're getting inside of Podcast Moguls, you are getting monthly live coaching sessions with me. If you have a one-on-one session with me, that's $1,000. If you only came to 4 coaching calls, that's already $4,000 in value. And by the way, you can come to coaching calls for life. I have people who joined in 2023 who, will still pop over to a coaching call when they, just want to ask a question. And I love that. I love keeping the community vibrant like that. So that already is an immense value of that time together. Plus, you're also getting the value of the community. And if you go to other podcasting groups right now, they're charging upwards of $197 a month to be a part of their private communities. And that's annually. That means like every single year you pay that monthly fee, which is $2,364 a year, every single year to be a part of those podcast groups. But you're getting the private community access for lifetime for one solitary fee. And it is definitely not $2,000. Plus, you're going to get all of my tailored, customized, podcast-ready sponsorship pitch letters and media kits. And you already know, just to learn about event sponsorship, I paid $1,197. So that's already an $1,197 value. And I'm not even charging you $1,197 to join Podcast Moguls. Plus, you'll get my guest pitch templates. So if you want to reach out to a stranger, you got to do it with a little bit of strategy and finesse. And I teach you how to do that. And a lot of people charge for this. You can go over to Etsy, you can go over to any marketplace, and you'll see these kind of prices for guest pitch templates. And this is included inside of your one-time fee for Podcast Moguls. And it's already a $597 value. Plus, you also get my Master the Gram course. So this is my course on how to build and grow your brand on Instagram. And hate it or love it, Instagram is still a very powerful platform for podcasting and monetization. So you get that course included, and every update to that course you get as well. Plus, you also get my Goal Getter Action Plan. This is my course about how I side hustled and approached side hustling 1 hour a day and was able to juggle my podcast and build out my business while working full time. So you definitely want this. And that's why I make sure it's included. So that by itself is $98 on my website. But I want this included because I want you to be able to build out your podcast like a business and not be struggling with that process. So total value you can see for all of this and the value of the program, $8,553. I'm obviously not going to charge you that. Nowhere near that. Even if you went to Podcast Mogul's website, you'd see $3,000. But I'm not charging you that, okay? The promotional price for joining Podcast Moguls is a one-time fee of $997 or 4 payments of $250. So it's pretty much the same, $997, $250. It's just broken down differently because I don't penalize anybody for payment plans. I myself, I love a payment plan. So you can head over to sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls, or the direct order form is in the chat right now. Okay. Deanna, yes, you'll be able to rewatch later. I will send the replay, which will be up for 48 hours. Okay. So let me know as you're joining. And as you're joining, I want to share the fast action bonuses. So again, pay in full is $997, or you can do 4 monthly payments of $250. And you're getting the same thing in both: monthly live coaching sessions, annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters, media kits, my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. And to reward my fast action takers, I do have some fast action bonuses. So these are bonuses you receive when you enroll in the next 48 hours only. You will get these extras. First of all, it's a one-on-one phone call with me. So you can finally quit playing and get your podcast into the world. I am going to help you to whatever wall that you have hit right now, whatever challenge you're facing, we are going to workshop it during this call. And I give you the notes from that call. I give you a recap of any links and advice that I mentioned. So, and I also give you the recording. So you can be present with me, knowing that, just like Deanna, you're trying to take all the notes. So you can be present and then you'll get that recap. But this is a strategy session one-on-one with just me and you. It's for the first 5 people only because, bandwidth wise, I only can take on so many calls one-on-one because I go so in depth with these calls. So make sure you join if you're ready to join Podcast Moguls, make sure you click that link and do that so you get that fast action bonus. All right. Charlene, welcome. LaShanta, welcome. All right. You'll get an email from us soon. Yamil, let me put the link again, you guys. Or if you're looking to a quick way to put it in your browser, it's sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. And I just dropped it again in the chat. Yamil, let me know if you see it. All right. Another fast action bonus is my exact podcast workflow template. So this is so you can streamline your production and publish consistently without overwhelm. So this is my process. Now, I've been publishing a podcast every week since June 2016. All right. Next year will be 10 years. So I got a workflow plan for you. All right. To streamline your life. I did it through when I was side hustling. I did it through 2 babies. So you could do it too. And this is my podcast equipment starter kit. This is my curated list of affordable, high quality gear. So you can sound like a pro from day one, from anywhere, right? In your bedroom, like me, in your living room. This is a picture of my podcast closet studio. I love podcasting from home. You will have to pry me out of my house. Studios are cool for special things, but being able to just turn on your camera and record a powerful, impactful episode from anywhere, that is a gift and that's a skill. And I break it all down for you in this. So this bonus is golden. And then I also give you, remember that cold email pitch that got me my first $4,000 when I was an independent podcaster, small podcaster, no network, all of that? I'm giving you that too as a fast action. And I'm also giving you a pitch email that landed me my first international speaking engagement in Barbados. Now, if you next year, you want to speak, but you also would like a little vacation on top, then identify where you want to speak and use this pitch, okay? Get you a free vacation while you're at it. And then finally, I will share my 5-day branding blitz with you. So these are the strategies that landed me in the top charts in week 1 of launching my show. Top 37 in business, top 10 in marketing. This branding blitz plan right here. I'm a marketer by trade. That is my background, social media marketing for organizations from you name it, MTV networks to Google to Georgetown, NPR. So I've distilled all this information for y'all and applied it to podcasting inside of this branding blitz. So come on down and get these fast action bonuses when you join. And just to recap them all for you right here, real quick again. It is the one-on-one call with me, so you can jumpstart your process. That's for the first 5 people only. It's my podcast workflow template, so you can streamline production and publish consistently without burnout. And then it is my podcast equipment starter kit. So my curated list of affordable, high quality gear, so you sound like a pro from day one. And my cold email pitches, so you can make that money with the exact email pitches that I use for sponsors who don't know me from a can of paint, as they say. And plus how I landed my first international speaking gig as well, with sending an email to someone who doesn't know me. And then finally, my 5-day branding blitz. So this was the strategy that landed me in the Apple Podcast top charts in week 1. You're getting all of these for taking fast action. So if you know you want to join, go on over so you can secure that one-on-one phone call with me. If you're on this call, you already have, a leg up on everybody else who's watching the replay. Sorry, replay viewers, still join though. Email me, see if you're in the first 5. So before we get into Q&A, I want to remind you of an equation that I use. As a side hustler, when you're investing in your side hustler, you are going to need this equation. It is, would it be worth it to you if This is how I make all my business decisions to this day. Would it be worth it if? Would it be worth it to you if Podcast Moguls helped you build your exit plan? Would that be worth it to you? Would being able to live life on your own terms be worth it to you? Yes, then Podcast Moguls is for you, because that's what happened to Lori of the Read, Write, and Create podcast. She says, I quit my full-time job as a tenured professor and moved to Spain in 2021. That's what she was able to do. Why? Because she identified that her new revenue stream was going to be her podcast. Okay. So she said, I launched a podcast using my Moguls training that is pretty much a sales funnel to attract creative writing students and coaching clients. I am seriously following the Nicaila Matthews okome methodology, and I'm continuing to see results and growth in my business. So her future clients discover her podcast because of the strategies and methodology I teach, and then they become clients. And that is her whole business model. She was able to quit, move away from stressful US, United States of America, move away, have a beautiful, stress-free life in Spain, well, more stress-free, and survive and thrive because of what? A podcast. And did you see the fact that she was a tenured professor? If you know anything about tenure, that means that's a stable job. They basically can't fire you. So to walk away from that, like, that's nothing to sneeze at. That means she was really sure of herself and her ability. So would being able to have the skill to make you so sure of what you can do with a podcast, to know that you can launch a whole new podcast and turn it into a funnel for your business. If that is the kind of life you want, then yes, it would be worth it to join. And then you can also ask, would it be worth it if Podcast Moguls helps you land major sponsors for your podcast? Would getting approached with sponsorship opportunities be worth it to you? Then definitely come on down, because that's what happened to Tolu of the UI narrative. So Tolu again joined with just ideas, not even one idea, y'all, many ideas. And through the coaching that I give you, I helped her to narrow down into the one winning idea that landed her sponsorship from Google, who reached out to her. She didn't even have to pitch them, but she did the work. She laid the groundwork that I teach, and that is what happened. And this is the only way to learn, y'all. The only way to learn is through action. That's the only way to get that aha moment of, ooh, what should I podcast about? What should my show be about? Who should I reach out to? How should I market? All those aha, they come through action. So that's the power. And one last thing, I forget I have so many examples, y'all. Now, this is the power of Podcast Moguls. So this is Nia Clark. She also joined Podcast Moguls with a whole different podcast. And then she relaunched a new one called Black Wall Street 1921, which chronicles the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. And she posted in the group, she said, nearly 2 weeks ago, my podcast passed 100,000 downloads in just 4 months. I didn't even pass $100,000 and 100,000 downloads in 4 months. So that is what I love. I love seeing the students surpass the teachers. And the podcast was a bridge, because the popularity of her podcast prompted BBC News to reach out to her, interview her, and produce a 4-minute short video with her narrating the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So not only is the opportunity that BBC reached out to her, but think of how many people now saw her narrating this and are now going to ping her for other opportunities to narrate other things, right? So this is what you really want. You want something that could be a launch pad. You want to create a platform for yourself. No more sitting around hoping that someone's going to come across your resume, or someone's going to scroll your LinkedIn and say, oh, I should hire her. You have to create the opportunities now, y'all. The opportunities are different in 2025. The opportunities, we have to go out and fish. We have to go out there and create the spotlight on ourselves. So that is what I teach you. Now, I hope you'll come on down and join Podcast Moguls today. If this is something that you want to do, set yourself up for 2026 right now. So again, your option 1 is one payment of $997, or option 2 is 4 monthly payments of $250. Pretty much the same payment. It just depends on how you want to pay today. You're getting all of this, $8,553 value, y'all, monthly live coaching sessions, annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kit, my guest pitch templates, plus Master the Gram, plus the Goal Getter Action Plan. Side by side, you can see you get the same things in both. And you can join today over at sidehustlepro.co/podcast moguls. Link is in the chat. Link is in the description for my replay viewers. And don't forget about the fast action bonuses, okay? Remember, one-on-one phone call with me, first 5 people, podcast workflow template, podcast equipment starter kit, my cold email pitches, my 5-day brand name blitz are all available for you when you enroll in the next 48 hours. All right. So now I'm going to jump into Q&A and we are going to get right into those. Okay. And I'm going to stop recording.